I am Marcus James Dixon with Gold Derby, and we are here with Leslie Kavanagh, the costume designer for The Handmaid's Tale on Hulu. Leslie, can you talk about what it's like joining the show that's already so popular and has this instantly recognizable costume aesthetic worldwide? Everyone knows the red, handmaids outfits. Was there a lot of pressure?
When you come in already in a show that's been established, there's always those feelings of what can I do? What can I bring to the table? And the thing for me that was really fun and exciting is that this season, season 5, the show has gone in a slightly different trajectory where the journey we followed June Osborne, and her journey has taken her into the free world of Canada and in Toronto specifically. And it was a really great opportunity to be able to explore what is her character now and her storyline, because you can't go backwards. We've seen her in the past in flashbacks prior when she was knee deep in Gilead in the first couple of seasons, but she's not that person anymore. So who is June, and how have all of her traumas and experiences, informed her of her choices to bring her into what she is now in Toronto? And it was really quite an honor in some ways. Anne Crabtree, who designed seasons 1 and 2 of this show, really set the tone and the flavor and the feeling for these iconic looks. And I really embraced the challenge of how can I work with what has been established, but also push the boundaries a little bit to put my own stamp on it, but also to show within the show that Gilead itself isn't static, that they are moving a little bit, because that's what season 5 is all about, is them trying to show the world that, hey, we're good, we're cool, come see our way of life, and trying to promote that. And so it was fun to be able to just push the boundaries just a little bit.
And speaking of pushing the boundaries, the second episode, the funeral, it was called Ballet. That the costumes in that funeral procession scene were so just amazing to look at. Some things that you've never seen as a viewer. Specifically, the handmaids wearing the black with the red veil and the red sleeves. What was the inspiration for their look? And then we'll talk about some of the other characters.
So when I first came in, we shoot in blocks here on The Handmaid's Tale, meaning we do 2 scripts together when you're shooting. And luckily for me as a costume designer, the first episode was direct continuity from season 4. So I really can't take too much credit for the costumes in there, because they had been established. We made some tweaks and that type of thing to those costumes. So I could put all of my energy into what was the funeral for Gilead. At the time when we shot the funeral, it was the biggest undertaking of all the seasons of the show, for the sheer amount of numbers of background and cast that were in full Gilead attire from head to toe. So that was a big challenge for us in the costume department, dressing everybody. And the inspiration really was, how do we make this a very, real pomp and circumstance ceremony, because this is where Gilead is putting themselves on show for all the world to see, and where they're really trying to sell that they are this great nation. So it had to be a real showstopper, and it had to have a lot of extra kibbles and bits on everything, which was really fun to do. And also showing the real hierarchy and changes of basically class system within Gilead, from the Marthas, the aunts, the Econo people that wear gray, to the handmaids, the wives, the commanders, and was really making sure that every single division within Gilead had something special happening for them in that procession.
The funeral itself was intercut with the ballet in Canada. So we see Serena in black and then June in white. And it was such an interesting juxtaposition. Can you talk about that?
So Serena, for me, had to be a real showstopper for sure. The whole reason she goes back to Gilead for this funeral is to emphasize, or hope that she emphasizes, that she's got power because she is pregnant with a commander's baby. And of course, that's really a very special thing to happen there. And she's sort of making some power moves for herself. So for her, I really, really, really needed all attention to be on her as a grieving widow, and how will she show sympathy, receive sympathy from people watching, but also make power moves. And she was scripted originally to be head to toe black. And in my early days of researching and fabric swatching and things of that nature, we came across this amazing midnight teal silk velvet. And that was it for me. I was like, I have to have this. This is sort of marries the grieving widow, but also keeps her in, I sort of feel like a slight undertone of a commander, because that's how she's trying to position herself. Because of course, anyone that watches the show knows that women in Gilead really have no say or power. And she's trying to make a power move that way. And luckily, when I gave my best pitch, all the powers that be, Lizzie Moss was directing us, and she's also a producer and of course the star of the show. So she was very on board. Warren Little was on board, Bruce was on, everyone got on board with that midnight teal. And then it was just trying to play with June being in Toronto. Using white was, as anyone on this panel can tell you, from Caution Design, white's a danger color for on camera. But for this specific thing was to be able to showcase her in the crowd, because there's a lot of crowd scenes when she's out with Luke looking up at the big jumbotrons and where she sees the funeral. And also in the ballet house, while they are watching the ballet, the lights are down. How can I make the focus go to her and Luke in that moment? And then the sort of good and evil side of playing colors against each other. That white for us was symbolizing, when Lizzie and I talked about, white was trying to symbolize that June's hopeful in this moment. She finally is having a moment of peace. She surrenders to it for the first time, that maybe life will be somewhat okay in Toronto. And we wanted to use that color as sort of to showcase that. And then, of course, it all comes crashing down at the end when she looks up and she's like, uh-oh. So that was sort of the feelings behind that.
That might be my favorite moment in all 5 seasons of The Handmaid's Tale, when they're looking at each other through the screen. I love how there's a new color of clothing in Gilead that catches June's eye, and that's purple, the color worn by the young girls who are of age to go to wife school. Can you talk about this new design?
This was really exciting for me, obviously coming into season 5, being able to introduce, we haven't seen a new color since season 2 when they went to the colonies. And so this was really, really exciting for me. It was scripted as a plum color. There was no definitive tone or anything at that time. It was just to showcase a different color. So I got to be able to be very creative and play around dyeing fabrics, playing around with swatching and mix and matching colors. Traditionally in the show, we've seen little boys in like a very light powdery blue and then little girls in powdery pink. I played around with mixing those colors to see what would come out. But then I kind of went a little bit deeper in that a lot of the children that are in Gilead, even these young girls that are going to go to wives, while they're showcased as prominent daughters because they are of commanders and wives in Gilead, they are actually really biologically mostly from handmaids. So I played around with the handmaid's red and the wife teal in doing dye colors to try to come up with a really interesting color tone. There's not just one specific shade. We've done a bit of a range to showcase for different things. So it was really fun to be able to have fun with that. And again, luckily, Elizabeth Moss and Elizabeth Williams, our production designer, and I worked closely on that. We were able to really make everything tonally fit in. And so it was really, really super fun to do. And I think that they look like little ladies, but not too severe. They're not quite there yet. So I think it was a good color to come out of it. And it was really fun to do.
And we have to talk about Serena's jail look, which is kind of this pastel yellow, this lighter yellow color. And I've seen a lot of jail scenes on TV, and I don't remember ever seeing yellow. So that really was something that stood out to me. Can you talk about that?
The jumpsuit was custom made. I made all those for that specific scene. And the yellow was, for me, to play against the severity of her situation. It was a juxtaposition of how she's trapped in this. She's in a holding cell at the time, but trapped in her life of where she is. And yellow is generally denoted as being a happy color, feel-good color. And of course, there's anything but happening for Serena in that. And it was a pitch that I just really liked. And there's no yellow in Handmaids. So for me, trying to showcase colors that don't already exist to play up the differences, I really wanted to have strong visual differences between life in Toronto and in Gilead. And I was trying to stay away from a lot of primary colors in Toronto And it's a softer, buttery yellow. That sort of, when you first see her, or even in the background, the people in the background, their yellow jumpsuit it's a bit of a like, oh, what's happening here? And then of course, she's sitting there having to breastfeed in the corner with no privacy. And it's just showing that she's lost any and all stature of where she used to be. And that she is just a victim of her circumstance, much like Handmaids were, but in a different shade, because of course we didn't want to do red.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can't wait to see what happens next. The finale is just in a couple of weeks, I think, right?
Yeah, I think we have 2 more weeks, this week and next week. And I think that's it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for chatting with us.
Thank you so much.